Welcome, and thank you all for joining us for another episode of Teachers for Teachers. I'm Dr. Dejana, the Director of Playful Learning and Education at the Two-Bit Circus Foundation, and I'm here with Dr. Leah, the Executive Director of the Foundation. Hello, Leah.
Hello, Dejana. I'm so excited about today. We have a guest joining us today who I went to school with. We were at grad school at the same time, and he was honored by, it was Antioch University. He was honored by the Alumni Society for his work in social justice. And I think what he brings to the conversation today is both his own experience as a parent teaching at home during this pandemic, but also as someone who is involved in student affairs at a prison education program that Dejana will do a better job of introducing. But I just want to say I'm really excited about it. So Dejana, do you want to introduce David and our panel, and then we can just jump right in?
Absolutely. So excited to have David join our conversation. So, David has purposefully placed himself in positions that both benefit others and advance his abilities in making social change. David's main focus is to enable people of color to empower themselves, especially youth of color from disadvantaged communities. His work lies primarily within the nonprofit industry, with a focus on youth leadership development, prison reform, gang intervention, poverty alleviation, and college access. Currently, serving as the Director of Student Affairs for the Tamalpais, and now works with prisoners offering an education while they are incarcerated. He's also worked for the National Institute for Criminal Justice Reform and has served as a site director for the Youth Build program. Wow, that's a lot. Those are a lot of words. That's a lot of service and a lot of dedication and action toward social change. In addition to David, our guest, we have our regular panel joining the conversation. So let's first say hello to Tim. Tim Griffin, go ahead and say hello.
Hey, how y'all doing today? It's good to see you.
For our frequent viewers, Tim is a regular with us. He's a retired STEM teacher and an award-winning singer, songwriter, and storyteller. He's the founding director of Griffin Ed, a nonprofit team of educators and musicians that are dedicated to raising academic achievement in STEM and other subjects through educational music. So happy to have Tim. Let's go ahead and say hello to Mark. Dr. Mark Riddle, say hello.
Back once again. Good to see you.
Mark's joining us again. He has degrees in music, theology, and sociology. He currently works at West Coast University and is a local here in Los Angeles. Let's say hello to Dr. Marcella Klein-Williams. Say hello.
Hi, everybody.
Dr. Klein-Williams is an accomplished leader, educator, and well-known in both formal and informal learning environments. A frequent speaker on issues of equity and currently the STEM director of Oxnard College. Let's say hello to Anne.
Hi, everyone. So glad to be here with you this afternoon.
Anne is also an accomplished and respected education consultant based in Los Angeles. She's currently the project director of COSIN's Empowered Superintendents Program and author of amazing book, Life Lessons in Leadership. Well, there you have it, our special guest, David, so happy to have you, and our amazing panel. Let's get this conversation started. Throwing it back to you, Dr. Leah.
Hello. So, David, let's first talk about your own children and what this year has been like for you as a dad and an educator.
Yeah, totally. First, just want to say thank you for having me on the show. It's an honor to be here. Appreciate being involved in the conversation. Being a dad of two boys in elementary school doing homeschooling is a thing. I think everyone recently has had to find some kind of balance, both literally and figuratively, in all ways. My wife and I, we always kind of wanted to homeschool our children. My wife is from France, and they have a different way of, approaching education. And we wanted to kind of combine, ideals from this side of the world and what she had experienced to offer our kids something new and different, in a way that would help them grow. And so, we took the leap, considering that, fortunately, our jobs allowed us to work from home during COVID to try to test out, see if we could be effective educators.
And how's it going?
Yeah, well, I think so far so good, right? With COVID happening, we got an eye of what it looks like to be in an elementary school classroom. My background it's geared more towards high school education and college, right? So I wasn't really sure what took place in an elementary classroom, and so I got to see a little bit of what took place. And really, a lot of it is kind of interpersonal skill building and kind of self-management of sorts, in addition to academic skill building. But the academic piece was more of, that was being taken care of in like 2 or 3 hours of the day, and the rest of the day was more exploration and play. And so we thought, oh, we could do this. There's lots of resources out there, particularly resources that would allow us to create a student-centered and student-driven educational environment. And that's what I'm really big on is student-centered education, project-based learning, experiential learning. And so that's what we've been attempting to do. We have just taking and recycling ideas from past work. We created monthly themes that our boys, came up with, and projects based within those themes, and worked with them to kind of co-create monthly curricula, right? And be more organic and open with it. And so sometimes that might be, we first started off with weekly, more focused themes. My son likes nature and animals, so we started off with exploring sharks, and there was an opportunity to have a small shark delivered to our house, and we dissected it and looked at all the parts of it, right? Or my younger son likes, he's more on the cerebral side and likes engineering and science, and so we got this kind of robot kit that he coded a robot and added dance and do different things, so we try to take what they want to learn and offer it to them in a way that they can engage with it practically.
And have you decided then to continue with homeschooling after the pandemic lets people go back to class?
Yeah. So my wife is fortunately she'll be continuing to work from home, so that will help out. My work in the prison at San Quentin State Prison with the college usually takes place in the latter part of the day in the evening. So we're and Sunday through Thursday. So we're fortunate to kind of have schedules that will allow us to work with our kids, and they're at an age too when they can do a lot of independent work as well. We don't need to always be there in front of them doing things. We can give them their own assignments, and so it's very helpful.
How old are your boys?
One just turned 8 last week, and I have another one. The older one is turning 10 in June, and he's 5 feet tall. I just want to add that in there. Monster.
Thank you for sharing your experience, because I think we have a lot of parents that are in that same sort of position where this year put them in a position where they could be more integrated, have a bigger role in their child's education and explored homeschooling. And some people quickly learned that that's not the thing for them. And then some people were like, this is actually really cool. It's something I wanted to explore. I wonder how I can continue. So thanks for sharing your journey. Me personally, I am a classroom teacher. I would love to homeschool, but I found it really hard to manage schooling my personal children at home and managing my digital classrooms during the pandemic. It was kind of no joke, but it's good to see other pathways. Like we can all try different things to see what works. I specifically had a question I wanted to ask you. You mentioned how you found that student-centered learning and project-based learning was really the way that you guys wanted to go. Can you share a little bit more about your take on student-centered learning and project-based learning for our viewers?
Yeah. Well, I'll say that approach came from my work experience in alternative high school settings, working with young people 16 to 25 who are looking to get their high school diploma and were pushed out or dropped out of high school for various reasons. And what was amazing about applying student-centered learning, experiential learning, and the like, was that it gave a sense of agency to the student and gave them a control to be in charge of what they want to learn, or it brought in the practical aspects of why they should be learning the things they're learning. oftentimes, especially for people who feel like they've been pushed out of school, the education has always been put on them. They've always been told what they need to learn and how. And so when you kind of take a sidestep from that and put students in the driver's seat, then they just find so much more meaning out of it, out of the education, and in ways that it could actually help them improve their own personal lives.
Absolutely. So we support that 100%. As I said before, I have a title of playful learning. We are all about project-based learning at our foundation, and just really focusing on the student and being student-centered. So thank you so much for sharing that. That's cool.
Yeah.
I spent a great deal of time this week at virtually at a ed tech conference, and what you're talking about, as Dejana said, is so near and dear to us. And 10 years ago, the technology didn't exist to be able to do really, truly center-based learning and allow the student to decide what areas they want to teach, because the teacher had to prepare for what she was going to deliver, or he was going to deliver to the classroom the next day or for the next year. And now we really do have the technology, and we had Nolan Bushnell on a few months ago talking about his ideas for student-centered learning. But really, the technology that can help, it is all about having them take agency, as you said, David. Once a student has found an interest, if you give them an opportunity to really drill down on that interest, it's either going to help confirm the interest for them and help them learn to research and learn to really drill down on an interest, or it's going to show them that, I'm not that interested after all, and move on to whatever the next bit of interest is for them.
Right. And that's important, right? To understand and don't like.
Yeah. Yeah. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the social justice work that you've done, because I feel like we have an opportunity in education. I know teachers are now, a lot is put on them. We want them to educate our kids. They're also there feeding our kids, and now the social and emotional recovery from this last year. But what could we be doing in the school system to try and help kids from landing in programs where they've been either expelled from school, or they're in a prison or juvenile detention, something along those lines? Like, what can we do in schools to help prevent that path?
Yeah. Well, that's a big question, because a lot of it, I think oftentimes we think schools have the primary role of, kind of equipping young people and children to kind of be socially constructive and then kind of fall in line later. But with a lot of factors, external factors outside of the school that kind of negatively impact students, it's an interesting question. What's in the school control is to build leaders, right? I think we have this kind of spectrum of school types, from, this working class, very hierarchical, obey punishment kind of structure. And on the other end is the very open, student-driven, equity and decision-making kind of approach to school that we don't often see in low-income areas. And it's like, so what, if all of them were if all school was implemented like the latter, and students had a lot more voice and control over how they were managed or what they learned, that would tell them that they mean something, that they are accepted, right? That they're worth something. I think, a lot of times, it's crazy. The students I work with at Mount Tamalpais College, a lot of them have been incarcerated since they were between 17 and 21 years old. And now they're 40, 50, 60 years old, right? So decades they've been in prison. And they often say, when they come to our school, especially the ones at the beginning, and they get those first assignments back where they did something positive to themselves, they come and they say, this is amazing. This is the first time anyone has ever told me good job, or first time anyone's ever told me that I can do something well. If someone would have told me this, or I had this environment when I was younger, I never would have been here, or I would have had a better head on my shoulders in my later teens, right? So it's really about this acceptance factor and this kind of ability to pay it forward and to be constructive and contribute to the bigger picture.
I've always imagined that oh, sorry, Tim.
No, no,
I've,
you go ahead, Mark.
I've always imagined, though, yeah, I mean, as you say, that some of our trouble, well, certainly, in the juvenile population, we've taken this one size fits all approach to education, and
Right.
some kids just can't do it. And not only do they not get the rewards, but they don't see a reason for why
Yeah.
they're being constrained in these ways that are so uncomfortable. So yeah, it's not even just like going the extra mile and telling kids, hey, you're doing something okay, but I think recognizing that a one size fits all approach to education is probably doing about as much harm as it's doing good.
Right, right. Yeah, and that makes me think of another thought around, what could we be doing as the kind of place and community-based education approach as well, right? We have, I think one thing that is a barrier to students who are having trouble in school is seeing, any examples of what school did for future versions of themselves, right? I don't see anybody in my community doing anything with education, so why do I need to do it?
Right.
Well, if you made the education focused on what's going on in the community and involve community members that are not educators in the classroom, then you're going to see more interconnectedness and a reason to want to go to school.
Yeah.
Tim, I saw you had something you wanted to ask.
Yeah, just going back to the kids that do wind up on the inside, because I've had several associates who've done time inside, and
Yeah.
a lot of my students in the parts of town where I used to teach full time, I had one or more relatives inside, and one of the things that occurs to me that's got to be a challenge, helping people learn from inside prison, is just access to things like telecommunications, because I know that for things as basic as a phone call, to speak with their relatives or their attorneys, it's a monopoly situation because they literally have a captive market, and the telecom companies just bleed those families. And I'm wondering how are you doing as far as access to information technologies and stuff on the inside?
Yeah. That's a great question. Every prison differs, particularly in its proximity to whatever bigger area and city it's around. San Quentin, fortunately or unfortunately, however you look at it, but is close to the Bay Area, right? So
Yeah.
it's easily accessible. And because of that, our model is we have a faculty volunteer model. We don't pay our instructors at the moment, and because of the kind of proximity piece. And why that's helpful though is to have a large volunteer base or just a base close in proximity to the prison is we can bring information and resources inside. When it comes to technology, that's a hard one. Fortunately, COVID has kind of put the Corrections Department of California in a position to really examine bringing technology inside. We are currently in the process of coordinating how we're going to pilot bringing laptops and Wi-Fi inside San Quentin State Prison, which is amazing. And two other prisons are piloting that right now. So there's some momentum there. It's starting, right? There's finally a thing like, yeah, we should help these folks get accustomed to technology, because when they get out, a lot of our students say too, yes, your college, I learned how to speak, I learned how to value myself, but do I know how to operate a computer? Do I know what this button means or this hole means on this laptop? Right? Do I know how the kind of process to pay for things at a restaurant? Like, no, right? So, that's something that is finally being addressed, but we still have a long way to go. I think there's a lot of fears around bringing technology inside prison that are tied to stigmas that can have some base or largely not. So I think that there needs to be a lot of kind of experimenting going on in spaces in having some positive results of that, so that way people are more comfortable with the idea of bringing technology inside. When you go inside, as you know, it's like you're considered to not have rights, right? So people are not necessarily in favor to help support and give resources to someone who is who is seen as a danger, while other people on the outside who are not considered danger still also don't have access to those resources. I'm sorry.
Well, you continue to teach. What does teaching look like And you're in this kind of really interesting position is if you compare to kind of the disruption that you've seen with your own children and the disruption as a result of the pandemic to the learners that you serve in the prison.
Yeah, the education space is in the prison is our college is a place of hope, right? It's a place of where walls are dropped. You see, students of all different types of backgrounds connecting with each other. When they leave, they have to for the most part, abide by some of the unspoken norms and cultural, segregation that happens inside prison. But in the education space, it's a different space, right? And so that's been taken away. That this peaceful zone in this place of hope has been taken away for over a year for these students. Not only that, they've been, kind of limited to their cells, or if, I'm not sure if you all are aware of the pandemic, how it hit San Quentin, but there was a monstrous kind of attack on the prison by COVID. And so if anyone were even to show a sign of being sick or mention it, automatic administrative segregation, which is, being in the hole, and they would be there for weeks, months at a time, because the prison was still trying to figure out what to do with it. So not only was there, this positive space taken away, the space became, extensively more negative and harmful, traumatizing. I mean, imagine you're sitting there, especially, people who are just about to graduate. Sometimes when, with our program at San Quentin, when you pass a class or you graduate, you get time off your sentence, which means you could go home early. People were that close to it, and then that got taken away. And then they had, meanwhile, they're, going through this process of like trying to deal with the trauma and listening to their friends on each side of their cells dying or becoming very sick, and nothing's happening. So it's had a very negative impact on our students.
Wow, that really hit me pretty hard emotionally, just kind of putting all that together, because we are collectively experiencing hardship, right? A range of hardships associated with COVID-19, but to think about what that might be like in the prison population, and in your work as an educator, creating safe spaces. Where do we go from here? Recognizing that this is where your learners are at. This is what they have experienced for a year. Classroom teachers all over the place are trying to figure out how do I show up and make a safe learning space after my students have experienced various amounts of trauma. So I'm just curious to know what type of strategies or what type of protocols that you have in place to kind of help support rebuilding a safe place and welcoming these, traumatized people, like we're all traumatized people, back into this learning environment.
Totally. That's a great question. And I think we're still figuring out, because we haven't had a chance to really go inside yet and make these plans. We're still unsure of when we'd like to go inside, or when we're able to go inside to continue programming. The first thing that comes to mind is just creating spaces for students to talk and connect on their experience with this past year and a half, and having as many other stakeholders, entities involved in that conversation too. If we can get some officers to come and be a part of those circles, for faculty members and staff, and understand the impact, just so people have a space to get off their chest. A lot of students sometimes don't have anyone to talk to. Students have been inside for decades, have never received a visit from anyone. So just this kind of interpersonal connection piece we want to really reestablish, and all of the kind of racial turmoil and separation that's happened too in this past year and a half or so, that gets exacerbated inside prison as well. We've worked really hard to kind of break down those walls, so now we have to go in and kind of re-engage in that work. And so I think the circles is a big thing. Our approach, we're thinking about starting off with non-credit bearing courses that the students are interested in. So, we have a computer literacy course, a professional development course, a financial literacy course, we were starting a mental health first aid. It's an idea that came out of New York State mental health first aid, kind of mental health first aid like course. These things to help build that community and confidence within students. To be in that kind of space again. They've been inside their cells. They've been pushed around and herded around. They have to get used to being inside a classroom again, right? They have to get used to talking with people from the outside. And so we just want to get them accustomed to just getting used to being in the school setting again.
David, I'll ask you just one quick question about the leadership in the environment that you work in.
Sure.
And first of all, thank you. I just think the world needs 100 more Davids, or many, many, many more Davids. So thank you for your amazing work. And I do a lot of work with school leaders as well. And the conversation is often around how do we leverage this crisis to make us go forward differently? And clearly you are doing that. And you talked about the technology coming in and how do you do that? Do you find that as a general rule across the leadership of all the different forces that you're working with, that people do want to, as they say, never let a good crisis go to waste, use this, what we've learned in this last year, to truly do things differently and not go back to what we perceived as normal?
Yeah, that's a great question. To take advantage of this pandemic to make change, on some respects, there's lots of opportunities that everyone can kind of rally around. Mm-hmm. Sometimes those changes are internal, and it takes individuals to introspect and be comfortable with discomfort, right? And to understand and acknowledge some of the gaps of understanding others, right? In order to kind of move forward. So I think this is providing an opportunity, and with all of the violence that's taken place in the country, there's continuously an opportunity to keep talking about it, right? It's not falling by the wayside. So that's productive, is that there's a constant opportunity for conversations, which then lead to action. And that, so like I said, that's why I think we're finally in an opportunity to bring laptops and internet inside. We've been trying this for 3 or 4 years. Wow. to bring laptops and internet inside. And all of a sudden, I mean, there was some change in leadership at the prison as well, after the pandemic really struck there. And so that new leadership, I think, wants to do more to, abide by the kind of rehabilitation philosophy. And so, yeah, we're just taking baby steps, trying to keep that momentum going forward, and keeping the conversations alive.
Thank you.
David, this is a really old statistic, I think probably about 15 years old now, but I remember reading that as little as 3 academic credits for an inmate drops the recidivism rate by 70-some%.
Education is the number one, tool to keep people out of prison, right? And I just want to share something, Leah, not necessarily, just to highlight and humanize folks inside. You've noticed I've not said prisoner or inmate, right, felon, convict once, right? So they're students, or they are people incarcerated. So just some helpful thought about how people want to be referenced. But that's it, right? Our students, they say, like I said at the beginning, if I had this kind of exposure to education, I would not be here. And all it takes is one, like you say, one semester, one class to have that positive experience, right? And to see the benefit. It's definitely a thing, and we see it with all of our students. It's a little harder with the younger ones, the ones that are under 25, I would say, just because they have been inside prison less, and they've had more exposure to newer technology and things going on in the world. But all the more reason to kind of create this environment of acceptance and work.
I'm so happy that you were able to come and talk to us about all of this, David, because even that reference, as soon as you said it, like, of course they don't want to be called that. So just putting those things into the kinder framework is really helpful. And this half hour goes by so fast, but Dejana, I think it's time to say goodbye.
Wow. So many more questions. I think we will have to invite you back for round two. David, thank you so much for joining us. And again, thank you to our amazing panel, Dr. Marcella Klein-Williams, Tim Griffin, Ann McMullen, and Dr. Mark Riddle. We're out of time. Until the next time, we want to say thank you for watching us. We hope you join us on our next episode of Teachers for Teachers. We're signing out.
Thanks so much, everybody.